Oh, we're live. Hi, Sanya. Welcome to Venture with Grace today.
Hi, Grace. Thanks for having me.
Again, I feel like your background's so beautiful. Just want to put out there.
Oh my God,
Um,
I just realized it actually matches my demug, so we're off to a great start.
oh wow, the detail queen. But anyway, when like to start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. You work at Goldman Sachs, Coatue, and then before you became a partner at Bain Capital Venture. And why don't we start with what were some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career that you've took to today's age?
Very interesting. Core lessons I learned. So much. But I think the things that I picked up in my Goldman days and that Goldman really does a great job of solidifying is just a relentless attention to detail. And I think the more I did start my career on the hedge fund side, and when you're able to quickly exit and enter positions and you're shorting stocks, there's no room for error in the calculations you run. And over time, like especially as you go earlier and earlier, you have more time to think through things, a larger margin of error. But I think the thing that I've kind of really internalized and carried with me is just this relentless attention to detail. And it's carried me well so far through the years. So I really do like it, and I seek it out and respect it in people. So I would say that's a big lesson. Um, and I think honestly, I'm going to go even before my career at Goldman started. I think my undergrad experience at Wharton really instilled in me massive just curiosity about the world around me. And I know when you think about business and finance, you don't necessarily think about curiosity and creativity. But I think Penn does a great job of showing you the multiple facets of the business world and the finance world. And I call myself a lifelong learner of business. I think it's incredible that we get to do this job where your work is to just think deeply about what's happening in the world, meet the most interesting people that have dedicated their lives to solving big problems, and try to forecast where the world's going to end up. So uh, that kind of spirit of curiosity has also brought me a lot of joy in this profession. And I think if you do something joyfully, you do a decent job of it.
Totally. I feel like, one thing we've briefly touched upon like earlier before we like enter the chat right now, it was I feel like the big tech company, you have put out some pieces about Microsoft, about like some of these like big companies play like Apple, OpenAI, related things. And I wonder, to start off, like I would love for you to share a little bit more about like what was your observations about like the big tech company in the AI ecosystem, like what's their play in general, and what are some places that startups can actually compete with big tech company? And yeah, maybe we can start off there.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I know so much ink has been spilled about the whole AI revolution, so to speak, and I think justifiably so, because the scope of change it's already bringing about, and the scope of change it is yet to bring about, is so massive. I think it will sustainably for a while change how continue changing how we think about doing business, how we think about running our personal lives, etc. What is interesting and really catches my interest about this point in time is how well the most massive companies on the planet are playing their cards right now. We're used to sort of sleepier incumbents from before that maybe missed a big change in the industry. These guys are causing the change in the industry. I think if you look at Microsoft and how far-sighted they were in partnering with OpenAI when they did, how much they're leaning into infusing AI enablement across all of their product areas today. You look at Facebook and how smartly they're going the open source route and orienting themselves as kind of the place where all developers go to tinker with this stuff. I think Google is one where they've just had so much uh, raw research power and brain power behind them that their recent like missteps in coming to and stepping up to the product plate, they have a buffer there. Like they can still like do a great job of what they're doing. So I just think it's been fascinating to watch companies with the number of people that these companies have and the market cap that these companies have innovate this fast. And I
Mhm.
think that also tells us something about the way AI advantages people that have existing data and have existing distribution. Um, it really feeds off of, data. At the end of the day, it's garbage in, garbage out. What are you putting into the model is going to impact outputs of the model. And the ability that these companies do have to sort of bring to bear their data advantage, and then add to that how resource hungry most AI development is, and they have the capital and they have the compute. And then add to that, customer behavior is so hard to change, but they already have this massive installed user base that they can roll out AI features to. I think they're very well positioned and they're playing their cards right. So it's not something that startups can discount. You're not just going to beat Microsoft because they were founded in the 1970s, because they're not acting like they were founded in the
Mhm.
1970s. So I think, the anti-incumbency thing that's
Mhm.
always been so hard to rely upon, like we can't rely on that anymore. So startups need to do what they've always done, which is find those protected areas where the incumbents cannot compete because it's going to cannibalize their own business model.
Mhm.
And I think that's where some companies have shown, um, like, insight and are progressing very well. And I think the other thing, again, when it comes to this finding areas, sheltered areas, is building in a way that the large companies are not going to build, which means all the way through to end customer in a very domain specific manner, where you're focused on building workflows that are deeply verticalized and serve a function that are so particular that the companies themselves aren't going to ever do it. And that's when you get into vertical AI, similar to vertical SaaS,
Mhm.
which again I think is a very interesting part of the stack to play. So yeah,
Mhm.
a lot of meandering thoughts here, but I think this point in time is very special. We're going to be looking back at 23, 24 for years to come. And I think the foundations of how things are going to work for decades to come are being laid right now. So it's fascinating.
I have a couple questions there. I know you're the expert of cloud infrastructure, cybersecurity, and dev tools or dev like developer ecosystem. So for like for cloud or anything that's like like from like the foundation of like where things are built, like in the past, like we like I feel like AWS is like extremely relevant. And then yesterday I saw that they are partnering with Perplexity. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce their name, but and then like Snorkel AI, like I've seen a lot of these like startups started partnering with these like bigger companies. And I wonder, like, as a developer, like, and also hear about like startups building on like call it like Together AI or like some other places. So I wonder, like, since like you're the expert here, can you kind of explain to us like how the money flow in the cloud infrastructure like space, and then like for these partnerships to happen, like what does that mean for like my for like AWS or like all these kind of like foundations that like in the past like startups or like apps are like kind of built up on.
Um, you mean to say how the partnerships are structured and like kind of the benefits that flow to both sides?
Yeah, so I guess like my question is kind of like, in the past, people are leveraging these like big companies like infrastructure, like or call it like Microsoft Azure or like, AWS or like Google Cloud to like build their startup on. And then nowadays, like there's new AI companies coming in, and then like I wonder like what does it looks like in in from the business angle, like what does this mean for like the startup and the big company, and maybe that's not the part that's changing, but just wondering like what's your thought on that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the hyperscalers that have been, the cloud providers, Azure, you have Google, you have Amazon, and we're in a place where they continue to have a lot of market dominance, but then you're also seeing the rise of GPU clouds. I
Mhm.
think that's what you're referring to, whether it's, CoreWeave, Crusoe Energy. And I think what is interesting to observe, like in that area, is the biggest constraint and bottleneck right now to AI development is access to GPUs.
Mhm.
And obviously, the king on the top of the hill here is NVIDIA, that has the manufacturing capability and truly the tech innovation right now, with their GPU manufacturing. It is obviously in their interest to create as much competition at the layer below them so that they can kind of commoditize it, have people compete against each other, and be able to sort of pick the winners. And if you also look at how NVIDIA is going, they want to have their own cloud provider. So in that world, it is in their interest to sort of arm the rebel army, if you will, and have people like CoreWeave, Crucial also have access to their GPUs, provide customers a wider variety of competitors to choose from, and also stop kind of the entrenchment of the large hyperscalers.
Mhm.
I think it is a very interesting point in time, and there are some great companies in this, rebel alliance, so to speak. And now it's up to them to take what is it is in the competitive interest of NVIDIA to be doing this. It is now up to them to kind of take this moment in time and extend it into product defensibility long term. Like, is it just access to GPUs, or are they now building tooling on top? Are they building an
Mhm.
entire developer ecosystem on top so that people that come for the GPUs stay for the development experience? And that way they can extend this advantage, which arguably is short term because you're dependent on someone else's competitive strategy. You are dependent on a commodity
Mhm.
supply demand situation. But you can extend that advantage, play your cards right, and then become really entrenched with the customer. So we'll see. I think there
Mhm.
is this sense in the market that the GPU shortage will ease over time. The time over which it will ease is the big question. And in that time, how people play their cards is going to determine whether their presence in the ecosystem is long term, durable, or it was kind of a flash in the pan sort of thing. From the startup's perspective, it is good to have people to kind of tap to get access
Mhm.
that you need to the GPUs. I think if you look at the hyperscalers themselves, they're the big thing that they're leaning into is AI enabled cloud, which is how do you bring in the power of AI development into the cloud itself so that they're not leaving room for upstarts to come and eat their lunch. They're like trying to provide all of those services themselves. Which goes back to what I was saying about the incumbents of our generation are different from
Mhm.
the ones before. And I think the reason they're different is because they sort of came to power by unseating unceremoniously the ones that came before. So they know what this sort of corporate coup situation looks like because they've pulled it off before.
Mhm.
And they're very determined to not let it happen to themselves. So I
Mhm.
think it is interesting to see the hyperscalers really fight to keep their lead, and make sure that they're meeting any of the upstarts step for step by offering the right feature set that the customers need, and then the upstarts are really trying to make sure that their interim product advantage translates into a durable strategy. So interesting.
Mhm. Wow, that's so, like, fascinating to hear, about your opinion about, like, NVIDIA is building their own cloud ecosystem, kind of, like, maybe that's, like, I feel like that's really interesting, and I wonder, you mentioned about, like, AI-enabled clouds, can you unpack that a little bit? Like, what does that mean? And then versus, like, the traditional, like, cloud.
I think it's basically the traditional cloud, but with the ability to now, use LLMs that they have in their marketplace to use on your data, and then have, a feature set built on top of that. Maybe you can train the model on your own company's data set. Maybe they're templatized use cases. So it's essentially, everything that you've always had, plus
Mhm.
now the ability to layer in the best in class models that are available, easily integrated into that cloud marketplace and then use it on your data. So it sounds really fancy, but all it means is like access and tooling to put in place those features.
Totally. I wonder, you mentioned about like, there's like some up and coming like startups that are partnering with Nvidia. Do you envision they're building their own cloud services, or do you envision they're just going to partner with a bunch of like smaller providers to maybe like in assuming investing in like a few of those, and then like like to kind of like plug it into their resources to these cloud providers? Curious, like what's your thought on that part? Like how are they going to stay kind of like competitive?
Um, NVIDIA.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, they're of everyone in the ecosystem, arguably they're the ones that have like the tech differentiation that
Mhm.
everyone else is building on top of. And I think their advantage is just based on kind of continuing to keep the edge when it comes to building the best chips in the market, and going from there and partnering, thoughtfully with people to get their products in the hands of customers.
Mhm.
And I think they're doing, a great job. You kind of hear these things about how Nvidia is signing, contracts with the hyperscalers that is sort of a lease back arrangement where they give them the chips, but then they lease it back to Nvidia, and then Nvidia holds the customer relationship. So I think like the next step, if they were to, there's enough for them to play with and what their core business is. Let me say that first, but I think there is a path for them to now go closer and closer to the end customer, the user of their product, and control that relationship instead of just handing their chips off to, Amazon, Google, and being like, okay, now you go do the rest. I think there is a, path for them to own that end customer relationship. It always pays to own the customer, at the end of the day. And you can also see that in how the hyperscalers are reacting. Like they're all trying to develop their own chips for training and inferencing of LLMs. So no one's happy in the ecosystem about this dependence on NVIDIA. And I think they're trying their best to diversify away from it, develop their own technology for it, because it really is the, gold of this gold rush.
I wonder, what's your thought on like, basically creating chips. So there's a lot of startups that are doing like chip design related startups nowadays. And I wonder like why does Nvidia have the quote unquote unfair advantage in this department? Obviously they have been doing it for many, many years, but why is it so hard for other people to kind of like catch up on? And how does a chip like supply department kind of work? I know that there's Nvidia, there's like two of their competitors. Oh my god, their names are like blanking in front of my mind. I
Intel
was
and
remembering.
AMD. Intel and AMD are the other two big chip
Yeah, yeah,
companies.
yeah. So I wonder what's a like I guess like what's do you feel like that's a place that like startup would be able to have an advantage to like design their own chips, or do you feel like I guess like what are some opportunities in the chip design department? Or if that's not like the biggest thing that people should focus on, people should focus on like maybe build up on whatever they already provided.
Yeah, I think, like you said, NVIDIA has been doing it for a while.
Mhm.
Um, and they've been doing it since way before it was cool. They were creating chips for, the GPUs originally were meant for gaming. They were used for Bitcoin mining. And now they just happen to be sort of the, highest throughput things you can train LLMs on. But NVIDIA's, advantage lies far beyond just the chip itself, which again, they've been iterating on chip design, they've been focused on GPU chips, but they also have a software advantage. They have CUDA, which is a platform for general purpose processing on the NVIDIA GPUs. It stands for, I think, Compute Unified Architecture. It's kind of come to serve as a software layer for AI innovation. So NVIDIA is a chip company still, but their long-term advantage right now is coming from software and how they enable development on their hardware platform. So I think what they've been able to do is they've been doing it for a while. They've set up these supply chains over time, and they're producing at scale. So they're not messing around basically, and I
Mhm.
think that's essentially the one advantage right now. Now, never say never. I'm sure, like human innovation at its finest, I'm sure people could come up with better chip design, more purpose built systems for LLM development in particular. Um, but I do think that you can't like discount NVIDIA,
Mhm.
not only in what they have, but also in where they're headed.
Totally. Yeah, like I finally found the articles, NVIDIA, AMD, uh, like cadence synopsis. Sorry, like, I'm just, like, looking at the graph. But anyway, hi, Sumit. Like, he is saying hi to you. But anyway, so I wanted to learn more about, like, since, like, you mentioned about, like, there's a couple competitors in the space. So since, like, you're the expert in the entire, like, we just talk about, like, cloud and then, cybersecurity as well as, there is other, like, so in general, like, dev tool related things. What are, like, call it like 3 big trends that you're seeing in these different spaces, like, due to the, um, adaptation of, like, AI?
I think what is really interesting to me right now is the interaction of AI with cybersecurity,
Mhm,
uh, because it has so many different facets to that engagement. I would kind of put it into three categories today. And some of the smartest founders I know are building in those three categories. When it comes to AI at cybersecurity, you can think about it as one, AI for security, which is, security teams are overburdened. There's so much alert fatigue. You have all of these systems and scanners that are screaming at you about all of the vulnerabilities that need to be remediated. You sort of don't know how to prioritize these vulnerabilities. Your security team is burnt out. And I think AI really does have the potential to be deployed to automate some of this tedious security workflows, extract signal from the noise, and then sort of supercharge this overburdened SecOps team. They can do so much with threat intel summarization, anomaly detection at scale. There's a lot that you can, just like, people are thinking through other verticals that
mhm,
can be where you can automate the menial tasks and free up people's time for higher order thinking. I think
mhm,
there's a lot that AI can be used for insecurity to do.
mhm,
Um, then I think the second category is security for AI. Now, it's not very easy to just let it loose in your ecosystem and, rest back as though everything is good. You need to create policies and guardrails around the use of AI models in the enterprise. Um, the funniest anecdote I've heard is one of the first things people look up if you put an enterprise search company within your corporate environment. One of the first things people search is their manager's salary. And there was this one incident someone was sharing is there was a Glean like
mhm,
solution people were using in their environment, and someone searched up all documents internally that had their name in it, and ended up finding a list of people to be laid off next week. So I think the issue with introducing AI into your environment is that it inherits all of your existing data governance policies and data security policies. And if that is not in place, you've just sort of created havoc in your ecosystem.
mhm,
So I think when it comes to security for AI, there's obviously guardrails you need to put in place against prompt injection attacks. You need to be monitoring the output of these systems to make sure it's in compliance with, firm policies. But then you also need to be paying close attention to your user access, data governance policies underlying it. So I think security for AI is another just huge category that is developing as we speak. And then the third one is security from AI, which is how do you protect your employees, your customers, people in
mhm,
general from the malicious use of AI deepfakes by bad
mhm,
actors. I'm sure you saw the Taylor Swift deepfakes. The fact that it happened to Taylor Swift, who is arguably one of the most powerful artists of our generation, and it took a while to take it offline, and it took a while to verify that these were actually deepfakes, and there was this like moment of just absolute confusion. it's crazy. And I think like what defense do any of us have, all the
Mhm.
normal people out there, when it comes to the use of deep fakes to discredit us? So I think there's definitely this golden age of misinformation, if you will. Phishing attacks are more sophisticated than ever, and our sense of reality is distorted. There was this incident where the CEO of a company told the employee on a Zoom call to wire over money, and they like wired over 25 million, and it was a virtual deepfake. So I think a lot of CISOs I talk to are introducing these kind of AI driven phishing attacks into their red teaming exercises, because there's a sense of, oh, employees don't know what's coming for them. And you sort of need to know what to watch out for, because the believability of the deep fakes is increasing by leaps and bounds every time a new model comes out. Um, I'm going to tell you a funny story. So I'm from India. My parents still live in India, and they have a bunch of friends where the kids, study abroad, um, work abroad. And one of my friend's parents got a video call from a police officer in the US saying your child is in danger. And then they put the child on the phone and said, "Oh, I've been in an accident. Please wire me money, etc., etc." Fortunately, the parents like put the phone down, called back to make sure, because they had the location. The location wasn't confirming with what he'd said on the call, and they realized that it was someone deep faking his voice. But it's crazy. That's the world we live in. So trust no one. And I think security from AI is a huge concern that we should all be watching out for and all be vigilant for. So yeah, those are the three buckets. How do you deploy AI securely? How do you make security better by deploying AI? And how do you keep yourself safe from AI?
I want to double click on the last part, since like you led the growth stage investments. So like in the space, I feel like I've seen so many startups that are doing like deep fake related startups and security startups. But I think it's really hard to figure out like, who will be able to actually, raise at like a growth stage, who actually can actually generate contract, since I think at the very early stage, it's like, a couple co-founders or like people coming out of a relevant position for somewhere to like do this kind of startup. I think this is a really good problem to solve, but I wonder like what would be you be looking for in founders and the products, and I guess like what are some metrics that you're using as a growth stage investor in the space that you feel like uh, you know, earlier stage investors should probably take some notes.
I think, really, it's not about taking some notes. I think fundamentally what you look for when you invest in a company in the private stages, it's actually not very different between early and growth. It's anything you're looking at growth is stuff you're looking at early plus some additional items.
Mhm,
So I think the thing that is always important is, and this I believe is the most important thing, is just founder quality and the team
mhm,
itself. And now more than ever, like you always want a team that is resilient, that is able to evangelize their own ideas, that is laser focused on competitive threats and very strategic in how to deal with them. Founder market fit is something that I specifically really pay a lot of attention to. Why this person in this market? What is their right to win? What gets them out of bed every morning to go deal with this particular problem? There, you want to really make sure that this isn't someone who started a company for the sake of starting a company, because it's cool, but it's the hardest job in the world, and it's a very lonely job. And making sure that they understand what they're signing up for, and then that you are there to support them, I think is absolutely
mhm,
key. But more than ever, when it comes to AI, I think that resilience piece really needs to be strong, because you're dealing with so much. You're dealing with it constantly. The ground is shifting beneath your feet. Your competitors are coming up with announcements every couple of days. A week in this ecosystem feels like a couple of years, anywhere else. Nothing stays constant. So I think that ability and the tenacity to deal with something like this is incredibly important and something that we screen for. Um, and I think, like, when a space gets a lot of attention and a lot of hype, you also end up having, a bunch of new companies. And then there's a little bit of separating who's in it for the right reasons with the right mindset versus who's in it because it's just something that's, top of mind for everyone right now. So I think above everything, team, and that is always the case, early or growth. Then it's about TAM, like the market opportunity they're going after. I always say it's kind of hard to go and win customers as is. Don't hobble yourself at the outset by just choosing a really, really small market. You have to work that much harder to go and establish yourself and win those customers. So I think like the market opportunity you're going after is very important. The third one I would say is tailwind, because the key question is why now? What is your insight about this market? How is it differentiated? And what tailwind are you riding on? You just make your life a lot easier if you're, betting on a big trend, and you're going to be able to ride its coattails, if you will. I think so. Those are the things that, in my opinion, don't really change between early and growth. I think the other thing that comes in at growth is you start to have a much clearer idea of what they have built. So you can really get your hands dirty with the product. You can figure out, have they structured it as, a vitamin or a painkiller? Is it a nice to have or a need to have? Is it something that people are completely dependent upon? It's mission critical and it becomes entrenched in the ecosystem. That's what you want from solutions. And I think then you have traction to dig into. You can really study like the numbers and the performance of a company, and the numbers tell you a story. My favorite things to look at, customer cohorts, logo and revenue. You can kind of see the trajectory. Are they increasing use, and are they able to expand with customers, or is this something that's a leaky bucket and you have to like work really hard to just stay in place? So I think then the numbers start talking to you. But again, at early growth, what I believe is numbers are only a lagging indicator. Things are changing so fast that you have to look forward. And to do that, you have to talk to customers. So I over index on talking to customers and really just hearing what they're saying about how critical that product is in the ecosystem or not. And talking to customers is also a really good way to understand the competitive landscape, because sometimes things you may not consider competitive um, are almost worth paying more attention to, because it's not someone that's building the exact same technology as what you are, but it's someone that is building a completely different way to approach but the same problem. um, there are many layers of abstraction at which you can kind of be deployed in an enterprise, and you can be competitive with technologies that have nothing to do with what you're building, but that is the right layer of abstraction for customers to adopt a solution in this space. So I think having a very broad lens on what you consider competition also helps you understand the market better, and talking to customers lets you do that.
Mm. I wonder, so like for like customers, talking to customers at a earlier stage, like sometimes they don't have the customer and then they may have like an active pipeline, but how do you kind of verify if the pipeline is real? Especially, I guess like for like maybe this doesn't happen to Bain. I'm sure this doesn't happen to Bain, but like I feel like as smaller investors, maybe you don't get to chat with the customer, or like the founder would not, since like the check would be smaller, the founder may not really care as much as if they share with like you all the kind of um the data, or like the customer call in general. Like how would you kind of verify if an idea actually makes sense? And since like the at the very early stage, they tend to like pivot a lot. Sometimes like when you were seeing a company 6 months ago, they were doing something completely different. And I wonder like also how do you kind of verify the TAM? Because I feel like the biggest like question about like identifying a market is like what is not the market, because at the end if you are very successful, you're like a Nvidia, you're probably gonna try to do everything. But when you're smaller, like like sometimes like I see the TAM, I'm just like I don't really know how like I would be able to convince myself this is going to be the TAM for this particular company. I wonder what's your kind of like thought process on like getting behind some of the companies.
Yeah, I agree with your point about Bain Capital Ventures. We really do just end up rooting for our founders. So we always have a direct relationship with the founder, and I don't think because of that, it's never hard to get in there in terms of understanding their thinking, spending time with them, understanding how the business works, and kind of getting the data we need to do that. I think above all else, and you're talking about the pivoting part of things, right? And I think that's why it's very important to bet on the right founder, because the right founder can very nimbly figure out like, okay, this is not the right approach. Maybe they have to pivot on the go to market approach, maybe the product is different. So as long as you are in sync with the founder that you have invested behind, you guys can hopefully navigate all of these changes together. So I would say above all else, that is the thing we screen for, and want to spend time understanding their thinking. Um, when it comes to TAM, I think what I mean to say is a lot. How do I? Um, you know, email security,
Mhm.
massive TAM. If you're going after email security and you write kind of that as, hey, this is the market that we're going after, like, great. You are, off to a flying start, huge playing field. Now, what's your angle? What's the differentiation? But if you're like, okay, I'm gonna, build a specific solution, whether it is a food delivery app, okay, but for people's pets, okay, but for people's pets that are dogs, okay, but for people's
Mhm,
pets
mhm.
that are dogs, but they're also German Shepherds specifically. Like, I guess that's what I mean when you've like handicapped yourself out of the gate. You're so specific in what you're building that, you know, that's where TAM becomes a question. I do think there's other things to kind of balance the TAM question, which is that may be where you're starting, but your vision could be, oh, I'm going to kind of do a all-in-one platform for people's pets. That again gets interesting, right? So I think there's a TAM is not a single shade color, it's multiple hues. And that's how you balance a massive TAM, because you have to start somewhere and you have to approach it in some way. Your first cohort of customers needs to see like immense ROI from what you're building. So you can like make it a multi-step process to build into that large TAM, but you should always have a large TAM in mind so that you don't handicap yourself or like silo yourself into a smaller market when you don't have to. So I think starting small and scaling up is a great idea, but at the end of the day, do go after like a big market opportunity.
I wonder, so like you mentioned a little bit about like the like the founder quality side of things. So since like your growth stage investor, like you have seen people who have made it through, call it like a series B. And I wonder like when it comes to like picking the people who you're back at, like call it series B or something, like um what are some benchmark they have to hit before? And like we also kind of like briefly chat about like founder market or like a founder problem fit kind of things. I feel like there's a lot of founder, they are just like towards like younger. So we're not talking about like the industry veterans who have sold to company to Google like 7 years ago or something. Like we're talking about like people who are maybe more of like, recent grads, or like not recent grads, but maybe like have like call it like lower than 5 year experience in the industry. And then maybe they're in like adjacent industry. How do you kind of judge if the founder have like the right founder problem fit? And how do you kind of quickly identify between like these two founders who are telling you the same thing, looks very similar on paper, that who is gonna win?
Yeah. I think by spending time with them is the very simple answer. I think, like, you spend time with people enough, people tell you who they are, and like I think qualities emerge from just how they're thinking about market, how they're talking to you about priorities, what sort of culture they're building on the team. I think, even if people's resumes are the same, the experience of people that have worked with them in the past is going to be very enlightening in telling you how they manage teams and how they run operations. I think founder background checks, therefore, become very, very important. Um, I also wouldn't, and by background checks, I mean like references from
Mhm,
previous employers and people that have worked with them in the past. I also wouldn't discount recent grads at all. Like,
mhm,
yes, there's a lot of weight that industry veterans carry, but then there's a lot of like fresh perspective that people that haven't been deep in this industry for years bring. There's almost a different way of looking at the world, and maybe they're able to solve issues because they're coming at it with just fresh energy. So I do think like experience is a very huge asset, but you can't discount someone just because they haven't spent 20 years in this field. And I think it all comes down to, um, there's a way to approach a market that you don't have a ton of experience in that can come across as full of hubris. It's like, oh, I'm just going to come in and change this thing that I don't understand. That I don't feel comfortable with. But if there's someone who's like, okay, I know I haven't spent 20 years in this, but that's why I have a different way of seeing things. And I have talked to 100 people that face this problem. And I have done my homework and I have gone and experienced the pain myself, and I have built this, and I'm quickly keeping the feedback loops really short and iterating with a small cohort of customers that I trust. They're giving me feedback, and I'm just going to be lean, nimble, and I'm going to try everything I can. I will not fail. I think that is a very different mindset. So I think as long as you're approaching it with humility, knowing that you don't have that 2 decade experience in the space, but still kind of focused on solving this problem, I think that's very compelling. So,
mhm,
every situation needs to be judged on its own merits. There's no real rules as to, which is what makes this job interesting. Like,
mhm,
there's no one profile, there's no one kind of founder. It's all about who they are at the core. It's not on paper, it's not resume, it's not experience. It's just who you are as a person that either makes you great for this job or makes you not that great for this job. So
mhm.
that's how I would end it.
Totally. Okay, so I want to be mindful of the time. We have a quick 1 minute fire round for you. So first question, what's your favorite book?
Oh, wow. Okay. Um, I really like the book Shantaram.
Mhm.
It
It's
is,
there's a movie. Is that a Johnny Depp movie book?
is it? I actually
I think
haven't seen
so.
it. It's a novel by Gregory David Roberts. It's just this like massive like odyssey of this one man's journey, who's thought to be a criminal, but he's not. Then he escapes, and he escapes to I think it's been years since I read it. A town in India, and then it's all of his experiences. He goes and lives in the slums outside the big city of Bombay. It's crazy. I love fiction, and I think it like that particular book is a testament to someone's resilience. So that really stuck with me. He just keeps going, no matter all the stuff that keeps happening to him. He just keeps going, and it's very beautifully written. I'm a sucker for good prose. I highly
Mhm.
recommend Chandra.
Amazing. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Who made the biggest impact on my career? What a great question. Um, Damn, I was not prepared for this. Lightning, that's what I'll say. I think this is gonna be a cop out answer, but definitely my mom. Because I feel like she, even though is not very well versed in the world of finance, like I think every time I would begin to like doubt myself a little bit, she'd be like, "No, no, no, you got this." And I think her being so far removed from the industry, almost gave her the ability to see through some of the things at a more zoomed out level, that where I would just get caught in the weeds. So yeah, she's been a great thought partner throughout my life, regardless of what job I've had. And I think even if I completely changed careers, she would probably continue to be the best advisor and the most impactful person for my career.
Amazing. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
How many people?
It's your party.
um, I would, top of mind, I would invite Charlie Munger.
Mhm.
I thought he had some of the most insightful takes in investing, and I've followed his writing for a while. And I'm answering this from the perspective of people that are not around today. So yeah, I would go back in time and definitely have Charlie Munger over, and then also just really like the way he dealt with the world. Like a lot of humility, but a lot of quick wit. He was great.
Where can we find you outside of work?
What?
Where
Oh,
can we find you outside of work?
um, probably in my backyard, watering my trees. If you can't tell, I'm like very into gardening and nature and so on. So yeah, I will be found in my backyard.
Amazing. Well, Sanyas, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks,
It
Grace.
was
This was fun.
it was fun. Okay, let me